Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. It's probably about time we looked at the largest motorway that the UK has to offer, the M6. It's 236 miles long and part of it was the first motorway ever built in the country in 1958. But we'll get to that eventually, because as always, we'll be starting at the start of today's motorway where we find the start of its starting point. Our journey starts in Leicestershire at the Catthorpe interchange where we find the M6, of course, the M1 and the A14. It opened in 1971 along with a section of M6 which ran from here up to Junction 5. A further link was added in 1972, taking the M6 up to Junction 7 where it met the already constructed M6. And that's the first hint that when it comes to the M6, things might get a little bit confusing. The construction timeline is all over the place, spanning many years from 1958 to 2008, and even in that time, the sections that were built have probably seen many changes. For example, the Catthorpe interchange, when it was originally constructed, it looked a little bit like this. And then, when the A14 came along in 2010, the interchange was improved, and it looked a bit like this. These improvements weren't, and the interchange suffered from heavy congestion as well as being the scene of several accidents, so they set to work on improving it again. Work commenced in 2014, and by 2017 the newly designed Catthorpe interchange was opened. Does anybody use the Catthorpe interchange regularly? Is it any good? Just after Junction 1 is a set of very obvious ghost slip roads. They were installed in preparation for a service station that was never built. I quite like this one because on satellite images you can see the land that was allocated for the service station and how it would have all worked. It's quite clear that Monteilo Road was realigned due to the M6's construction, but the leftover bits of Monteilo Road would have been used as the access roads for the service station. Interestingly, at the time of the motorway's construction, they installed a footbridge connecting both sides, but they didn't install any steps for it. Like the ghost slip roads, it was built in preparation for a service station. Once a developer had committed to building it, they would have made use of the footbridge for access. Of course, this never happened, and the bridge just sat there for years. By 2004, it was in such a sorry state, they got it removed. Just before Junction 3, and the motorway passes over the Coventry Canal, which starts in Coventry, and it opened in 1789. If you follow the canal along for a short distance, you'll arrive at Hawkesbury Junction, a canal-to-canal interchange where the Coventry and Oxford canals meet. Just next to the junction is an old engine house. It used to contain a Newcomen steam engine which would have pumped water out of nearby mines into the canals to maintain the water levels. Back to the M6, and at Junction 3 we find the A444 alongside an awful lot of space left for future upgrades. It's possible to fit a flyover into the junction, meaning the A444 could bypass the junction altogether, but whilst there is space for it, there doesn't appear to be any plans to do anything with it. The Coles Hill interchange is where the M6 meets the M42, and it consumes both junctions 3A and 4 of the M6. It's quite a complicated design, but it wasn't always like this. It used to be a far simpler roundabout style layout with relatively shorter slip roads. A few years later, when the M42 was constructed, connecting slip roads were built between the motorways. The final evolution of the Coles Hill interchange came in 2003 when the M6 toll was completed and the M42 was connected to the M6 at Junction 3A. Next up is a field. Well, maybe, it depends. This is one of those moments where I'm writing the script but I have no idea what to expect in person. Maybe there's a field. Maybe there's a build project going on, maybe there's the finished article. But what am I talking about? Well, on your right, just before you get to Junction 4A is a field for which there are plans underway to construct the eternal wall of answered prayer. At 51 metres high, this monument, when completed, will be twice the height of the Angel of the North found on the A1, and it'll be visible from 6 miles away. The cost will be £9.3 million, or at least it would have been 2 years ago when the plans were first announced. I imagine the prices have risen slightly since then, but in any case, at least £9.3 million. When or if it's completed, it will serve as a landmark for drivers on the M6 for years to come, but it's £9.3 million. I mean, surely if you can get £9 million together, you'd be... We're not going there, let's move on. Speaking of wasting money, HS2 will be passing right by the M6 on its way to Birmingham as we head past Junction 4A. Good news for the eternal wall of answered prayer, because if that's not been cancelled already, HS2 will be passing right by it. Anyway, I thought we'd take a quick look at the HS2 project from the sky, just to see what they're up to around here. When this bit of HS2 is completed, or if it's completed, we can expect a large railway junction squeezed in between the M6 and the M42. Junction 5 is missing a set of slip roads. The original design for the junction looked a bit like this. But before building it, they realised that it might cause a few problems, as it would encourage local traffic to use the motorway to access the city centre via Junction 6. Keen to avoid this, they simply didn't build the slip roads that would have allowed you to do that. I always feel like I'm properly entering Birmingham just after Junction 5, and it's at this point that we start to drive along the 3.5 mile long Bromford Viaduct. It's the longest viaduct in the country, and it's even 400 metres longer than the second Severn Bridge crossing. Not that you'd think that, given how it's buried amongst Birmingham, but it's a true fact. For me, and maybe many of you guys, one of the most noticeable and memorable landmarks on this part of the M6 is the Fort Dunlop building. As the name suggests, the building was originally owned by Dunlop, a tyre manufacturer who started in Birmingham in 1901 making tyres for bicycles. In July of 1914, there was a minor falling out between countries, which led to a huge spike in demand for tyres. And to meet this demand, Dunlop started construction on this massive factory in 1916. They finished it in 1920, by which time the wartime demand had ceased to exist. But with these newfangled motor vehicles becoming increasingly popular, Dunlop were able to continue making tyres, and did so at this site right up until 2014, when production was moved over to Germany and France. Interestingly though, Dunlop still manufacture tyres on this very site. It's just in the building next door, which is known as Fort Parkway. Since 1916, they've manufactured aircraft tyres on this site by the M6. We can't come to Birmingham on the M6 and not talk about Junction 6, aka the Gravely Interchange, aka Spaghetti Junction. It's one of, if not the largest interchanges in the country, covering an area of around 30 acres. There's approximately 560 concrete pillars supporting the various carriageways, some as high as 80 feet. And somehow this interchange manages to cram in 2.5 miles of slip roads. And what that means is that this interchange is made up of more slip road than it is actual motorway. It's undergone many repair works in recent years due to cost-cutting measures used during its construction, the increase in traffic weight, and it's also been found that road sole had weakened the structural joints. I believe these repair works are now all complete, and a bonus fact, the interchange celebrated its 50th year of opening last year. Between Junction 6 and 7 is a depot that sits right alongside the M6 with its own access to and from the motorway. However, just before you reach that, keep an eye out on your left and you might catch a quick view of the 7 locks that sit on the Tame Valley Canal. Whilst you can only see 7 of them, there are actually 13 locks in total across the Perry Bar section of canal, allowing for an elevation change of 106 feet. I wonder if he knows Alan Rickman, the Swan. Back to the motorway depot, and it's home to... who the hell is it home to? Back to the motorway depot, and it's home to National Highways, as well as being the main vehicle HQ for the Central Motorway Police Group. Formed in 1990, this group of around 180 elite traffic officers and staff police the M6, the M5, the M6 Toll, the M42, and pretty much all of the main roads across the West Midlands. Junction 7 is a first for the series, I think. Its design isn't quite like anything we've seen before. It's a roundabout-style junction, but it's unique because the west-facing slip roads sit on the inside of the roundabout. Usually, of course, we'd expect them to be a bit more like the east-facing slip roads, but not in this case. It's most likely down to space constraints when it came to constructing the junction, and also the M5 interchange being nearby doesn't help either. And with no traffic lights or give way signs on the junction, good luck with that. Junction 8 is also known as the Ray Hall Triangle. It's named after the farm that it was built on, and it's where the M6 meets the M5. And just after the interchange is where we find the Bescot Rail Depot and Freight Yard. There's no real reason to include this freight yard in the video, other than it does run alongside the M6. I just think these sort of places look really cool when you're filming with a drone. So that's what I thought I'd come and do. The railway line that the depot and freight yard sits on opened in 1837. It's not exactly clear as to when the depot itself opened, but I would imagine sometime in the early 1900s. In the 1950s, the site was redeveloped and it became a hump shunting yard, and by 1966 it was handling up to 4,000 wagons a day. I remember being absolutely fascinated by this place as a young child. As we were on our way to visit family, I was sat in the back of the 80s VW Passat. Who would have thought I'd be filming it all these years later? Next up, we should hopefully find a newly designed and now fully open Junction 10. It used to be a fairly straightforward roundabout-style junction. It's now a fairly straightforward roundabout-style junction with a couple of extra lanes and some new bridges. Work started in 2020 at a cost of £78 million and was supposed to be completed by 2022. They have not finished yet. Whilst we're looking at build projects, Junction 11 is due some changes at some point as well. In 2014, it was announced that a new link road would be built connecting the M54 to the M6 northbound. Looking at the situation today, we can see at junction 10A that the access between the M54 and the M6 is limited, so they've obviously set about sorting that out. The problem they've got, I assume, is that Hilton Park Services gets in the way a bit and prevents the simple addition of a couple more slip roads. Hence, junction 11 is going to be reworked to accommodate this new link road. I believe they've just about started to clear the intended route of vegetation, so perhaps the actual construction might start sometime soon. Having passed junction 12, the motorway soon crosses over an abandoned railway. This section of the M6 was built in 1966, so a small box tunnel was constructed to allow the railway to pass underneath the motorway. And just next door, there's a bridge that carries the railway over the canal. What's interesting here is that where today we find the M6 would have once been a number of sidings where goods could be loaded onto the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. These goods would have most likely come from the Littleton Colliery found a short distance away in Huntingdon. The colliery operated from 1877 right up until 1994, when it was closed as part of a Close All the Coal Mines programme. Just after junction 13 is a secret motorway underpass. I've come here simply to ask you guys, why is this here? I can't find any record of a previous road, and it doesn't seem to lead to or from anything. It's not marked out as a footpath, probably best not to ask how I got here, but yeah, I don't know why this is here, but it is. All I know is that it was constructed in 1962, along with a section of the M6 that ran between junctions 13 and 15. I suppose maybe it could have been a farm access road before the Argos distribution centre came along. I don't know, let me know if you got the answer. And there we are then, guys. I think that'll do for this week, don't you? Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that. Join me next week for part 2 of the M6. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'll be wicked sweet awesome, and of course we wouldn't want you to miss out. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Until then, take care, bye bye.